Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. On our YouTube channel we talk about all things homesteading and try to implement some of those things on our rural 100 acres here in southern West Virginia. Now today's video topic is going to be a little controversial, and I'll be honest, this topic cannot be covered in just one video. We're probably going to have to come back and readdress this as we get more information in, as you guys give me more feedback from across the country and across the world. So what are we talking about? Should you avoid buying land that does not contain mineral rights? Well, first of all, what are mineral rights? How does somebody own mineral rights? Well, I'm standing on my property right now. I, as a property owner, own surface rights. That means I have the right to alter this property, to build, to do whatever on it, whatever I want, obviously within the confines of zoning and state laws and federal laws. But the surface of this land is mine. On my property, I do not own the mineral rights. The mineral rights are the rights that somebody else has to ownership of any minerals, anything of value underneath me. Now this excludes water, and we're not going to talk about water rights and wind rights and some of these timber rights, some of these other things. Those are completely different videos, because we'd be up here all night and I'd be standing in the dark. But in my scenario, I do not own mineral rights. So the owner of the mineral rights has a right to the minerals beneath my homestead. So that can be oil, it can be gas, it can be coal, it can be gold, silver, it can be iron ore, it can be uranium, it can be whatever. The owner of those mineral rights has the rights to the mineral underneath my property. So is that common? Is it common to find property where you just would be getting the surface rights and not be getting the mineral rights? Well, depending on where you are in the country, it can be very, very common, or it can be not common at all. In fact, it may seem foreign to people. Where I am in Appalachia, in the heart of natural gas and coal, to find a piece of property that still has 100% of its mineral rights is virtually impossible. It's really tough to do, unless you're buying 10,000 acre tracts like you were buying a large investment property for timber and mineral and all that. But to find smaller tracts of land with mineral rights intact, very, very few of those exist in Appalachia anymore. So does that mean all of those properties are worthless? No, let's talk about that. I did a quick little bit of research on West Virginia. In West Virginia, there's 352,000 tracts of land that do not have mineral rights included, so they are separate. Now again, I don't know how many tracts of land there are total in West Virginia, but 352,000 parcels, that's a lot of land that doesn't have mineral rights included. Many of these parcels, when it comes to mineral rights, are larger tracts. If you can imagine looking at your tax map, the mineral rights could be a much larger tract from one owner, and the surface rights could be made up of multiple parcels compared to the one parcel of mineral rights, if that makes any sense. And we'll do an example here in a second. These mineral rights could have been sold off years ago, even decades ago, and surface owners, like when I bought my property 18 years ago, I had no option to buy the mineral rights. They were already owned and purchased decades ago. So I didn't have an opportunity there. It was either buy the land surface only or walk away from the land. So let's do a scenario here. Let's do an example that maybe makes this make a little more sense. So let's back up. Let's say we back up about 3 generations. And let's say we've got a father, a patriarch of the family, that owns a 1,000-acre tract of land. And he owns not only all 1,000 acres of the surface rights, but he owns 1,000 acres of the mineral rights. So he's trucking along and he decides, okay, my kids have grown. I've got 5 children, they've grown up, I want them to have land. So he sells or deeds to them 5 tracts, individual tracts of 30 acres each. So that's 150 acres that he fractured off into 5 different parcels. But he says, well, I'm going to keep the mineral rights to all 1,000 acres because I have wells, gas wells throughout the property that I'm getting royalties from, and that's going to help me in my older years. I don't have a retirement, whatever the case may be. The motivation behind that, he's going to keep the royalties that are coming in from those wells because he has the mineral rights. So as the years go along, let's say at some point the father passes away, the 5 children and the grandchildren start inheriting the land, they bust it up, it gets busted up into other elements. Well, at that point, maybe at the after the estate's settled, some of the kids come together and say, well, we want the extra money. Let's sell the surface, or let's sell the mineral rights, and we're not out any cash, and we still have Dad's land. So they do that. They find a company, an oil and gas company, that comes in and says, sure, yeah, we'll buy 1,000 acres of mineral rights, and everybody gets a big fat check. And they split that among the family. Whoo, everybody's happy. Well, generations pass, and the grandkids have that land. Maybe the 150 acres, the different parcels of 150 acres are still used, but maybe that remaining 850 acres has been busted up even into smaller parcels, and family owns it, non-family owns it. There's just a whole bunch of people there. When you come back and look at that, the gas company still has mineral rights to all of that. So there could be deeds written for 10, 20, 30 different parcels that make up that 1,000 acres, but the oil and gas company still owns the mineral rights to every bit of that land underneath. So that 1,000 acres is still in their possession. So if they've got those wells, they can choose to cap those wells. They can use to drill more wells. They can do whatever they want there, basically, when it comes to accessing that oil or gas. So are those surface rights owners, are they screwed in that scenario? Is the gas company just going to absolutely obliterate their property? No. And I say that definitively, and I need to back that statement up, because I know some of you guys are like, wait a minute, I've got an example. My sister's brother's cousin did this. Yes, we'll get into that. But no, the surface rights owners still have just as much rights as the mineral rights owners. Now you may say, well, the complication is one lays on top of the other. So a surface right owner cannot impede a mineral rights owner from getting his property. But a mineral rights owner cannot destroy the surface rights owner's development or their property. If you're the mineral rights owner, then you have rights to get that oil or gas or coal or whatever it is. And the surface rights owner has all of the rights to keep his place looking nice and tidy, and he's built all this pasture or whatever he's done. So where is that rub? Well, of course that rub, it comes together in some sort of compromise. So if there has to be a compromise, then we all know that landowners and big corporations, fossil fuel corporations, they get together and they work together all the time without any issues, right? Obviously not. So usually that's when arbitration comes into play or lawyers come into play. And everybody loves to play with lawyers, right? Well, let's look at an actual scenario that happened here on Red Tool House. And many of you may not recognize where I am. I've only been up here, I think, once in a video, and I have 200 and some videos, so I'm not sure everyone has watched 200 and some videos on our channel. But where I'm standing is actually the edge of the property, right here at this tree. Is this tree showing up? Yeah. So right here at this tree, my property line comes down this point, comes right through this tree, and keeps on tracking on the ridge. I'm on the crown of a ridge. If you can imagine, the mountain comes up, here's the top. So that's why there's still a little bit of sunlight, because if I was down in the valley, it would be much darker. So in this scenario, you can see this nice little clearing, what we consider a clearing here in West Virginia. And if I turn the camera to the left, let's do Luigi here. So you can see this clearing comes down. It's actually a little road. It comes down and goes out trucking this way. And there's a four-wheeler trail here. You can see there's some four-wheeler tracks. This is a nice, decent road. I am now standing on property that is owned, surface and mineral, by our local gas company. There's 40 acres in here. It's kind of a bowl. There's 40 acres in here that they own that's adjacent to my property, and they own the surface and the mineral. But if I step right back across here, I'm obviously now back on my property. Let's come back here. There's a point I need to make. So 40 acres here. If you go on out this road, you actually come to my next neighbor who has about 300 acres. The gas company says, Dave, we'd like to uncap that well and drill deeper because we can get deeper into this Marcellus shale. And so Dave's like, okay, well, let's work out a compromise. They worked out some details there. Well, the gas company says, we don't want to come up your driveway. His driveway is way that way. It takes me like 30 minutes to get to the front of his property from the county roads. So they said, well, what if we came in Old Red Tool House Road and came to the gas site there? This gas well sits way up on the hill behind his house. So he's like, well, that makes sense, but you're going to have to cross Troy and you're going to have to cross a couple other guys. So they call me and say, Mr. McClung, we would like to drill Dave's well deeper. We would like access to the well, and there actually is in my deed, there's a defined right-of-way in here, but the right-of-way is extremely narrow. And so they said, we know we've got a right-of-way, but we want to talk to you, we want to make sure it's okay, let's just sit down and talk about this. So we had a really good conversation, and they said we need to bring in pretty large equipment to come scrub the well, to drill it, to do all the things we need to do, and we need to get that equipment across your property. Well, this is the very back of my property, so it's not like they're driving right by my house, so that wasn't a really big issue. If they were driving right by my house, then of course the conversation would have to be a little different. But at the time, I don't have a picture of this, but at the time, this right-of-way here was almost like driving in an alley. The ground was bermed up so high that when I'd come through on my four-wheeler, I couldn't see over the berm. It was always rutted out and muddy because there was no ditches. It was just an old logging road, and again, was an old gas access road. And you can see this pipe gate that's here. It's kind of funny. It's now wedged between these trees. You can't, you can barely move it, but this white oak blocks it from swinging closed. But before this white oak grew up, this gate used to come around and would close off this road. Well, you can see now this is much, much bigger. I'll turn the camera back here a little bit. So this is much, much bigger than what it was before. So the gas company said, well, here's the problem, Mr. McClung. We got to come in and we got to make almost a 270-degree turn. And we're not just in a side-by-side. We've got these large semi-sized units that have to come in. So they said, we need to clear out trees. We need to doze this dirt down. We need to do a lot of things. Are you okay with that? And I said, yes, on the conditions of this. And the conditions were, I wanted it flat, I wanted it seeded, because this is an awesome little food plot, and we looked to see if there's any trees of value. At the time, there wasn't. There was actually just this nasty little ponderosa pine. It was all bent, and since I'm on top of the ridge, most of it was blown over. I said, there's no timber value there. Let's just pile it up, and I want you to cut it in what's called mulch cuts. So that's 4 feet or less lengths. They cut it all up and piled it. You can see there's, like here's some old rot from that. These are some of the stumps and some of the things they mulch cut. So this was years and years ago. So they've cleaned all that, or they piled all that up. That's rotted down. They actually, I come up and mow this. Sometimes they'll come up and mow it. So they do all of that. They maintain it. Now I do have to give them access. So that's why there's four-wheeler tracks here, so the guy can get to the well and do the maintenance he needs to do. But for just simply allowing access to the back corner of my property that I'm hardly on it anyway, I've got a nice food plot here. I could come up here and mow this, keep it nice and clean. I could even rotate animals through here as long as I allowed the gas company guys to come through. And if we followed this road out, this road stays on my property for about a half a mile. And the road is awesome. I mean, it's one of those deals where it's nice and grassy, there's ditches cut, it drains well, it's on the ridge, and it's a really nice drive. So it needs mowed. I haven't mowed it this year. So that was a win-win in that scenario, even though they weren't getting the mineral underneath me, which ironically they are, because they're just over there using new drilling technology, so they're probably gone under 6 different properties drilling that gas because of the horizontal capabilities. So they're getting the natural gas out from under me anyway, most likely, and I don't have to worry about their surface disturbance. But if we would drive down, and again, Dave doesn't own that anymore, so I don't go down there, but if we drive down there, we'd see that well site looks like this. There's just a wellhead sticking up about that tall. It's natural gas, it's not an oil, so it's not like it's got a pump rig. It's just a little head deal here with a pipe running down off the hill. So they've done all their mitigation, they've done all the restoration. It looks really nice. Granted, there's still a gas well there. So it was a good situation for both Dave and for me. It worked out really well. So my brother's farm, that's about 10 miles away from here, 130 acres. When he bought the place, there was a gas well just about, it wasn't even 100 feet away from the house. And so it was a little unsightly. It was a piece of pipe sticking up out of the ground, not a huge issue. So he had a scenario there where the gas company, to come maintain the well on a regular basis, they would drive up his driveway. Now his driveway was almost a half-mile long. It was all gravel. So they'd come in every once in a while, or maybe once every 3 years, they'd bring in a scrubber truck to scrub the well and do certain things. So it looked a little ugly from time to time, but what was really worked out well for my brother is at any time he could call them and say, hey, my driveway gravel is starting to disappear. It's, mud's starting to come up. You guys send trucks up here all the time. I want gravel. And they would actually come gravel his driveway. I've watched them put down probably 60 to 80 tons of gravel one time just on his driveway because they're using it. So there's a lot of compromise that could be had there. Now, for every story that I have of how well that works out, I'm sure there's going to be other stories of how people got absolutely screwed when it comes to mineral rights and companies coming in and taking advantage of them. Yes, I get that. And that's where you're going to have to lawyer up in that situation. But you're also going to have your ducks in a row, and you're also going to have some compromise. Again, on the back corner here, not a lot going on, so it really wasn't that much skin off my nose. I feel I got an improved piece of property back here. But I have about 6 different well locations on my property that have been capped and have been abandoned for years. If you guys have watched my channel long enough, you'd see that I'm constantly tripping over this oil pipe, this 3-inch metal pipe that's just laying all over the place, because when those were active, they were pulling oil into a centralized location and taking it out. So the gas company didn't, or the oil company didn't take that with them when they went. So that's still laying there. But if they came back in and said, hey, we want to retap these wells, we're going to try to do that, then yeah, there were definitely some parameters that I'd want them to follow. There's some guidelines, but if you think about it, in our situation, I'd have some really nice roads to those wells, because I could demand what I see here and say, hey, if you're going to come up the middle of my valley where I've got my barn, where I've got my pig pasture, then we have to have culverts in, we have to have ditch lines, we have to have gravel, we have to have all of this in place so you can come back and access that. Yeah, you think about it, it's very similar to how some people will lease or sell a small section of their land for a cell tower or some sort of radio tower. A lot of that works hand in hand there. So you may be saying, well, Troy, that works out well for oil and gas, something where they're just punching a hole in the ground. But what about coal? What if a mining company came and said, Troy, we want the coal underneath you, which I know there's coal there. What if they said, hey, we want the coal underneath you, we're going to build a mine in your valley? Well, first of all, we'd still have to work out accommodations of, as a surface owner, I cannot be kicked to the curb. They can't just doze through my buildings. They can't knock over my barn. They can't disrupt anything I've put in place. Again, I'm on 100 acres. I'm on the front 10. So they could come in and say, well, the back part of that property, Troy, you're not even doing anything with. We're going to come back there and do something. Okay, yeah, it'd be tough for me to argue, no, you can't disrupt my forest. Again, they'd have to pay me for all the surface damage, the loss of trees, all of those type of things, the loss of land use. So there would be compensation that comes out of that. And in that scenario, if it was a total train wreck, I could obviously take the full payout, try to sell the rest of my land and get out of here, cut my losses. I don't think we'd be in that scenario. And quite frankly, 100 acres, a coal company is not going to mess with 100 acres to put a coal mine in. They need thousands of acres to put a mine in, whether it's an underground mine or whether it's a surface mine. So they would have to have the mineral rights all around here, and they would have to negotiate a lot of mineral rights with a bunch of other entities, a bunch of other gas companies and oil companies and so forth. So not really going to happen around here. And obviously coal's on the decline, not a lot of permits being written for new mines. So probably not going to be an issue. But that being said, it could be an issue. But as a surface owner, I have rights that have to be recognized. This gate cracks me up. So the obvious question that comes out of this is, how do you know whether a piece of land has the mineral rights, big spider web right there, I'm not going to walk into that, has the mineral rights or doesn't have the mineral rights at the time of purchase? Or how do you even know, Troy, how do you go back and prove that you don't have the mineral rights, or who owns the mineral rights? Well, this is a part of this whole scenario I think stinks on ice. And especially in Appalachia, especially in our county. But I think, from what I've researched, this is an issue that spans the entire country when it comes to deeding of mineral rights. Because mineral rights could be severed so many years ago, so many decades ago, the surface rights could change hands multiple times, and the mineral rights never go anywhere. There's never a new draft. The information about the mineral rights does not have to, and usually is not included on the surface right deeds. So there are two different deeds that are going their own direction. And the mineral rights could change hands 6 times, and I, as a surface owner, would never know. Vice versa, the surface rights could change hands 16 times, and the mineral rights owner would never know. So the tricky part is, and what I've researched is, when you look at a deed and say, well, it doesn't say anything about the mineral rights being known, so I'm going to assume that they come with it. That's a very bad assumption. Supposedly the law states if the mineral rights aren't mentioned on a deed, then it's just carried over from whatever was before it. Well, again, who the heck knows what's before it? And also in researching and talking to some of my buddies in the oil and gas industry, that if you just have a standard title search done by a lawyer when you're buying a piece of land or thinking about buying a piece of land, they're not going to get that deep into it. They're not going to find that information out. What you have to do is you actually have to hire a title specialist that can go in and look specifically for mineral rights and be able to track that down. So what does that look like? Well, again, I'll give you another scenario. I mentioned my brother, 130 acres, about 10 miles from me. He actually owns 45 acres worth of mineral rights. It's on his deed. But nobody can tell him where those 45 acres are in conjunction with his 130 of surface. So it's kind of funny. It's like, okay, I've got 45 acres of mineral rights. What can I do with that? And nobody can tell him where it is. And even if you go back, he's done a lot of research on that. In our county, the courthouse burned down in the 1970s, so all the records were lost. And it's just been a fiasco because they asked people to bring their records in. They tried to rebuild the record base. And there's a lot of shenanigans that have happened in that process. So he's really at a stalemate right now. He has no way to prove where those 45 acres are. He knows he owns them, but it really doesn't mean anything. He gets no value out of it right now. And if somebody could argue, well, we're going to come in and drill a well, but we're going to be on the 80-some acres that we own over here, so we're not encroaching on yours, so we don't have to pay your royalty. So you can see where that foolishness can happen there. I must be standing right in a dang spiderweb. So what's even more interesting that can really make this a crap sandwich is, in Appalachia at least, because of the Marcellus and the Utica shell and the, whatever the new one, Rogersville shell, that's these names they come up with. Because of all the advancements, technological advancements they made in tapping these deeper gas deposits, there's been discussion about actually severing mineral rights again by layers. So you could have surface rights, mineral rights layer 1, and mineral rights layer 2. Okay, yeah, there we go. Let's screw this up even more. So there's opportunities there. Again, when you have large corporations and corrupt government playing together, we all win, right? So that's going to be interesting. I don't know that that's necessarily going to flesh out, but there has been some discussion about that. I'm going to link below to a news article that actually references a lot of what I've talked about and talking about mineral rights and just talking about some of the things here in West Virginia. Now again, it's all about your state law. You're going to have to research the law in the state that you're dealing with because it's totally different. If you get out of coal country and you get into gold or uranium country, totally different scenario, I'm sure. So be sure to do your research. So the takeaway from this, should you avoid land that doesn't include mineral rights? Again, I'm going to be biased because I'm on a piece of land that doesn't include mineral rights, but I would say no with a caveat beside that, maybe a little asterisk beside the no. Just be aware of what you're getting into. It isn't a deal breaker. The first thing I would do, because that's what I did here, was I looked around at all the local properties and say, what are we dealing with? If we have a strip mine right here and my little 100 acres is attached to a 8,000 acre strip mine and they have the mineral rights to it, there's probably going to be an opportunity for them to come over and just keep on stripping. So yeah, that's something to think about. But look at the scenario. Talk to your neighbors. Try to do the research. If you can afford to do the specialized mineral rights search, go for it. Do that. But you're not necessarily going to see that in a regular title search on your property buy. If you took the hard line and said, I'm not buying any land for my homestead unless it comes with mineral rights, then you're going to reduce that circle even smaller of tracts of land that could be a viable option for you. And you're probably going to price that out of your range. Again, this really pertains to energy-rich areas. If you were in West Virginia and said, man, I need 100 acres and I need it to have its mineral rights, you're going to have a small group of land to look at, but it's going to be much, much more expensive per acre because it has mineral rights. And this is an energy-rich area. And unless they're a total dummy, nobody's going to give that up for less dollars per acre than a piece of land that's just surface rights. So if you take that hardline stance, prepare to look at a lot less property and prepare to open your wallets even bigger. If you're in an area that's not energy rich, you may find this all day long. Hey, we're in the middle of whatever, middle of Central Florida maybe, and mineral rights are not an issue. So just do your homework, but I wouldn't say, don't walk away. Don't say hardline, I'm not going to even look at a piece of property if it doesn't include mineral rights, because you may be passing up on a great opportunity to get some land that could be affordable. All right, well, obviously I have kicked the old hornet's nest right across the field here. Comment below, let me know. I'm sure I'm going to hear some stories about how people got screwed. I want to hear those stories. I'd like to put all this together in a collection, and we may come back and talk about this again, because again, I'm only speaking from my experience. And if we get enough interest, I've got a buddy who's a title lawyer, so we'll even get that turkey on here and get him talking. We'll get a couple of oil and gas guys in here talking. Maybe we'll have that's what we can do. We do like a grudge match, surface owner versus mineral owner. Pow. Anyway, comment below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Check us out on our website, redtoolhouse.com. Take care, everybody.